Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we are actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can still all be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming, and we have a very special guest today, Kathy Leckey. Did I say your name right?
It's Leckey. No L at the end.
No L at the end. I just put that L in there.
Yeah.
Leckey. Welcome to my podcast.
I'm glad to be here.
And tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I am an imperfect mom. I'll start with that. I love that you say that. I use the perfectly imperfect phrase all the time. My kids are now, my youngest just started college, but I've got two in their 20s, so they're all adults. So I have been an imperfect mom for 23 years. And so when my kids were about, the oldest was 12, and so they were 12, 11, and 8. We had pretty much a catastrophe happen in our life. The the first few years of them growing up, we lived in this beautiful little town in Connecticut, and they had all their cousins around, and they were in great schools and great sports. And my now ex-husband ended up getting charged with a federal crime because of work. And so in a split second, that company went under. He had to file for bankrupt. I worked at the company, so I lost my job as well. And we ended up picking up our family and moving to Buffalo, New York, where my family, my parents and my brother and sister lived. So our entire world was uprooted. We lost everything financially. Our cars were repossessed. Our house was foreclosed on. We went to Buffalo, where we didn't have a network of friends or a support system for the kids. And I was an absolutely imperfect mom at that time. I was going through my own traumas. I was trying to manage the trauma for, everybody in my family. And looking back in those days, I was very strong. I was able to, force myself to get up and force myself to get through the day, do what needed to get done, get the kids to sports, turn in the forms for school, even though they were always late. But I really was not healthy at that time. I was dating unhealthy relationships. I was, drinking too much because I was going out with some friends thinking that I needed to blow off steam, or that I deserved it because I was working so hard, or that I was so stressed that I needed to go out. And so that was a really unhealthy part. And my kids obviously were there for all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So after living in Buffalo for exactly 4 years, we ended up moving our family back to Connecticut, where they had grown up, and getting back involved in our community. And that is when I got healthy. I found out through the patterns of relationships that I kept finding myself in, and a really significant breakup with somebody who was super unhealthy, that a lot of these patterns had to do with my own behavior. So I started to learn about codependency. And when I did all of that work and started to heal myself, is when everything changed for me. My relationships with my kids have been repaired. I have forgiven myself for being imperfect. I let go of a lot of I let go a lot of the shame and the guilt, and now have understanding for where I was, understanding for the things that I didn't know at the time, and so now I'm actually doing coaching on healing from codependency for primarily women, but there are some men in the groups or in the one-to-one coaching that I do on processing through big transitions, getting cheated on, getting a divorce, losing a job, um, I mean, all kinds of things that people, and even in just regular parenting, where moms will say, like, I'm losing myself. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what I like anymore. So I coach on self-care, which is really the healing from codependency. So that's the short story. There's a
Yeah.
lot more. I started out as a teacher. That's what I went to school for. Started out as a teacher. I've been in business for lots of years in different businesses, and now I've come back to coaching, which is really what I love to do.
Yeah. It's an interesting, your story is very fascinating, as well as I would say common in, difference in the details, but where we have something where we hit the rock bottom and we find some lesson inside of rock bottom, some motivation to pull us out of that bottom, and start the healing journey from this place to where you are now. And I think that's a beautiful journey, and then to spread, share what you've learned to others.
Well, that's what I kept telling myself as we were going through it. I
Mm.
was exposed to lots of different types of therapies and energy healing, and I worked with a life coach and did some visioning, and so I was exposed to a lot of different self-care modalities that some of them worked for me and some of them didn't. And I just kept saying to myself, I didn't necessarily think that it was all going to work out, but somewhere inside of me, I believed it was going to. I just couldn't figure out how, or I couldn't imagine it, but I felt it. And I kept saying that I needed to, I was learning so much that I just needed this to all be for a reason. And that reason was to be able to help other people through similar situations, because you're right. People have parents who die. I mean, there's people go through huge life altering experiences every single day. But a lot of times they think that they're alone, or that the feelings that they're feeling are unique. And we find out, and that's the beauty of the group. That's why I love doing the group coaching, is because in the first night, everybody comes in and they're so nervous, and they don't, they're thinking that they're not going to talk, and which is fine, then nobody has to talk. But by the end of that first hour, you can just see the relief on their faces, and they'll say, like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one that felt that way, or thought that, or and so it's just so it's so beautiful when people understand that they're not alone, because that is such a very vulnerable, dark, and lonely place when you feel like you're alone and no one can understand what you're going through. And
Yeah.
obviously, I didn't have any friends whose spouse went to prison. Nobody had gone through this before. There was no. Uh, I definitely did not know the way. But I am thankful. Like you said, there were lessons. I am thankful for everything that happened. As hard as it was, those were the things that really brought on my own healing. Otherwise, I would have just continued on doing the same thing with different people and
Yeah.
situations.
I think that when we feel like we're the only one going through something, then it makes it a lot more difficult for us to reach out and ask for help, because if we're the only ones that are experiencing this, then how is there anyone out there that's going to know how to help?
Right.
You
And if
know?
we're struggling with codependency to begin with, we
Mm,
don't want to ask for help because we're the helpers. And a
yeah.
lot of moms, the lessons, the healing from codependency can apply to a lot of moms who are used to putting everyone first, not thinking about themselves, not taking care of themselves. Um, they know what everybody in the family loves to eat, but they don't know even their own, favorite foods. They know what everybody else likes, loves, needs, and wants, but they don't know the same things about themselves. And they are the fixers, they're the doers, they're the ones that are taking on the volunteer jobs and um, and extra work at in their job and doing everything. And so to ask for help, it's very, very difficult. And that's one of the things that we learn is that being imperfect is perfectly normal and necessary, and that we eventually get to love all of the parts of ourselves. So a lot of times people will say, everybody at work thinks I'm great, but if they really knew me,
Mm.
or they'll even say that about their friends or even their spouse or their partner, that they're still hiding certain pieces of themselves that they just can't forgive themselves for. And
Yeah.
so that's what we do.
I recorded a podcast earlier today where we were talking about hiding pieces of ourself um, from certain family members, from certain friends. We don't want to say um, things that might offend that person or, hurt their feelings or whatnot. Um, and I'm re-listening to the first program that got me into coaching. And there was a woman who shared a story about how I don't know if you're familiar with the Total Truth Letter,
No,
but
I don't know that.
it's a coaching tool that if you Google it, there's lots of different examples. But basically there's 6 layers of the human emotions, and it starts with anger and it goes all the way down to love. And if you're feeling angry, all 6 of those layers are there all the way down to love. And she had done this letter to her dad, and she's the only person that the leader of this program had ever known that gave the letter to the person that the letter was
Mm,
written to.
usually they burn it or rip it up.
Exactly, because it's not for them, it's for you to
Right.
get rid of the emotions. Well, she had given it to her dad, and he said, I didn't know that I had such a hold on you. I release you, go be free. Right.
Wow.
And that lifted this 3,000-pound weight that she had been carrying around. And then she said, but it wasn't until he died that I actually felt a relief. And I don't remember her saying that when I listened to it 4 years ago. And
Hmm.
my dad passed in April of this year. And I didn't have the most perfect relationship with my dad. Most of it was drama made up in my head, but with evidence from real life. But
Right.
um, I'm I'm a master at creating drama in my own head.
Oh, the
And
stories we tell.
right. And I remember, I've healed a lot of that stuff, a lot of those stories with my dad, and I don't remember feeling relieved that he was gone, but I do remember feeling a little bit of a freedom to maybe say some bad words on Facebook because I know he's not looking anymore. And, little things like that, of just little pieces of myself that I was hiding to protect other people. And
That is exactly what we talk about. It's the little things. So when people hear self-care, they think they have to go for a massage and they don't have the money, or they have to do, and it's not. It doesn't cost money and it doesn't take time. It is the smallest things of speaking up, saying what you need to say, saying what you think and being okay with it. Setting boundaries comes from believing that you're worth it. And freedom, like you said, you had freedom because there was actually a physical change in him not being present, which I'm sorry for your loss of your dad. But that's what we get to experience when we heal from codependency, because we stop worrying about offending other people or protecting other people, or worrying about what they think of us. We come to a place where we love ourselves and we know ourselves so deeply that those things start to happen and we feel this sense of freedom. And I love that word. I'm so glad you said that word, because there's nothing better than feeling free.
yeah,
Those emotions really are 3,000 pounds each. They're heavy and they hold us down, and they stop us from doing things that we don't even realize until we start to feel a little bit of that freedom.
yeah. I wrote a piece about my journey um, with my dad, where I went from daddy's little girl to hating looking like my dad, to hating myself because of of being like him, and then coming full circle to not only loving myself but loving being like him. And because I went through all of those emotions that I'm sure you can imagine come with that,
Mm-hmm.
there's a part of me that was afraid to talk about it, where people who knew him would read it. I was
Yes.
terrified of people who knew him reading it, because I didn't want what I wrote to sound judgmental, because it's not about him. It's not about, it's about how I interpreted his actions. And that I believe in my soul that my dad loved me from the moment I was born till the moment he took his last breath. And I didn't always feel that way. And I, I, his sister, his youngest sister that he was the closest with, she read it from the first draft to the final draft, and feedback along the way. And just, we've had amazing discussions about it. And then there's another sister I was a little bit afraid to send it to, because I didn't know how
Right?
she was going to react to it. And then when she said that it was a beautiful tribute to my dad, I was like, okay, so it's not those feelings that I was feeling are just residual from, it's not from the past. It's not that I'm bashing my dad, because that was not my intention. And then I still have that little voice in my head, like, oh, you should show it to your stepmom. And I'm like, I don't know what she's gonna say, but it's like, what it's gonna do is open a conversation.
Yes. And understanding. You get an understanding when you're sharing it with his sisters, you're getting a perspective from his upbringing and what were their parents like and how did that affect how he could communicate or show love. And we talk a lot about inner child because we learn these thoughts and beliefs about ourselves and the world when we're under 6, 7 years old. So it goes really far back, and we look at that and we do it not to blame our parents, but to finally look at them as the adult that we are today, as if we're a parent today, we have a completely different understanding of what they were capable of doing or not doing. And then we can tell ourselves, like you said, I know that he loved me from the minute I was born. Maybe he didn't show it, but I know it. And
Mhm.
we can tell ourselves these things that are true and really change the way we feel.
Yeah, and in the last episode of this podcast, we were talking about being raised by imperfect humans. and
Yeah.
we're imperfect humans, and now
Yeah.
we're raising imperfect humans.
Yes.
And it's, and I was talking to my friend earlier today, and she said, and that's how it will be for the end of till the end of time.
Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
like it is, and but we hold our parents, we trap ourselves by holding our parents to a different standard
Mm-hmm.
of being imperfect. Like we think that our parents are perfect, and we react to that in two different ways. One, we either think that we're the ones that messed up, that there must be something wrong with us because the perfect beings that brought me into the world are perfect, so it must be me.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it starts that way and then flips into, who are these people that brought me into this world, and why did they mess me up so bad? And it's the fact is that they weren't perfect. They never were.
Right.
And they were
And
doing the
they
best that
couldn't
they
be, right?
could. Yeah, and
Right.
they were doing the best they could because they loved us, and they didn't want to cause us pain. They wanted what was best for us, and they did it in the best way that they knew how.
And if we can believe that about our parents, then we can also believe that about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is the one thing that the people in the groups have such a hard time letting go of, is saying, I stayed in this relationship and my kids saw things they shouldn't have seen, or, I was so stressed out that I did this and I said this and I acted this way. And so we have to, again, like, nobody wants to admit that we're human and that we're not perfect, but there's such freedom in knowing that we're not, and that we're doing the best that we can, and that there are therapists out there for when our kids are old enough that can help them. But, I mean, the beautiful part about, for me, the best part about the healing for me is that now I can have these conversations with my kids in real time, and I can say, remember when this was going on? Well, this is what was happening. It wasn't that you weren't good enough, or that, it wasn't something about you. This was the situation that was happening. And there's such healing in that.
Yeah. And then if you still have young ones and you make a mistake, you can go to your children and say, hey, I made a mistake and this is what happened. And
Yes.
like, we don't give kids enough credit that they understand.
For their understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, kids are so, I think kids have it figured out, and then adults mess them up. And
And the
then
thing is, I mean, I find that the kids respond to our healing and as we start to do things better, the past matters less.
yeah.
They're really watching what we're doing. How are we trying and doing better? And, I would tell my kids I'm in a class because I'm learning to be a better parent. If it was therapy, whatever it was, I'm reading this book because it's helping me deal with my stuff. And so they see that and they know that things can change and people can change, and we can always, um, I don't want to say always do better, but we can always work on ourselves and do work and really make changes.
Yeah. I don't think I've told this story in a while. I do remember when my son, I know we were living in this house. So in the last 3 years, my son and I were standing in the closet of my bedroom. And I don't remember the exact situation, but he looked at me like he was afraid. And I remember reaching out to my coach and saying, how do I let my son know that I'm safe? And his response was, be safe. And that was incredibly frustrating because I was safe and I had
Right.
been being safe for several years. And as I got deeper into my coaching training, and I saw that look on his face again, and I said, can you tell me why why you have that expression on your face?
Yeah.
And he said, I don't want to be in trouble. And so I had interpreted this look on his face as he was afraid of me because I knew my past. I knew how I had yelled at him, and how he could be afraid of mean mommy,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and I had a layer of guilt there. And so I interpreted this expression as of being afraid of me specifically versus being afraid of being in trouble. And it shifted for me. Like, oh, okay, it's not me, it's the situation. Nobody wants to be in trouble. Totally understand that,
Right.
you know? And
Yeah.
it's just, it's different when you can be curious in a situation with your kids and pull the emotion, for your emotion out of it, your self-protection out of it,
And your assumptions,
and your assumptions.
right? Like
Yes.
not being a mind reader, not expecting yourself to be a mind reader, not expecting other people to be a mind reader, communicating and just asking that question. That's a great mom. Like even if you're thinking it's because of past behavior, just asking now today, that's a great mom. Just somebody that's trying and curious and has great intention.
Yeah.
I think we're so hard on ourselves as moms. I mean, I'm not the only one who thinks that, but we are.
Yeah.
And in the the truth is that, you know, when we're trying, when we're listening to things, when we're reading books, when we're talking to our friends and asking, those are the things that matter. It's not about being perfect or raising the perfect kid. It's about just moving forward and learning and growing and with my kids all out of the house now, I can say that it ends up working out.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Is there a piece of advice that you want to share with moms?
Well, it's all self-care. And I know that one thing that I tell a lot of the younger moms that I work with is to write things down.
Yes.
So I remember being in the middle with my three kids, being very young, thinking, I wish I had time to do this. I wish I had time to do that. I wanted to garden. I wanted to cook. I wanted to, you know, do all of these things. And I didn't have the time or I didn't allow myself to make the time. I'm sure looking back, I could have set better boundaries and created that space for myself, which would have been great. Um, but at least to write them down, because what happens is what I was saying in the beginning is that we forget about all the things that we want to do, that we love doing, that make us happy. And when we eventually get that hour of time or a day, we don't know what we want to do anymore. And it's just really important to stay in touch with those things that make us happy. So, so it's for me, for young moms, it's really about setting boundaries, taking time for yourself to do these little things, um, really taking care of yourself in those day to day, using your breath, staying present. It's all about self-care for me because I think just like the analogy with, you know, when a plane goes down, you have to put your oxygen mask on yourself first. That is self-care, taking care of ourselves, being calm and at peace. That translates over to our kids.
Yeah. I'm really hoping that this idea that self-care is getting a massage or a pedicure or manicure, getting your hair done, that all of those things, these superficial things, um, are getting that enough people are talking about it that that thought process is being debunked.
Right.
Because I don't think I've ever had a guest come onto my podcast that was a self-care advocate saying, go get a massage. And
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with a massage.
exactly.
What you want or need at the time. Like I have my massage therapist comes to my house because I don't want to go to a salon. I like being done and being in my
Yeah.
house. And I also, while I'm pregnant, I don't like getting pregnancy massages.
Mm-hmm.
I was trained as a massage therapist. The day that they taught it, I had one of my very few panic attacks in my life. And there's something about pregnancy massage that freaked me out as the massage therapist, and
Wow.
I don't enjoy it as a pregnant woman. And so I said, hey, let's do a chair massage until I get too big to fit in the chair.
Right.
And I mean, that's been working so far, and we'll adjust it as it becomes necessary. But it's being flexible and having ideas, brainstorming different ideas of what you enjoy. And if you
Yeah.
don't remember what you enjoy because you've been taking care of other people for so long and you never figured it out, start with something.
Yeah.
Google
So I just, so
self-care, right?
when I first started, I had to Google it. I had literally Googled what is self-care? How do you do self-care? I didn't know. And I started to keep a note on my phone of things that made me happy, like, walking my dog downtown. It was like random things, like kind of obvious things. But when it came time where I was stressed out or I had an hour, I really couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. So I started making these lists. And then in my groups, I started saying, like, okay, make a list of your affirmations, make a list of times that prove to you that you can trust yourself, all of these things. And I ended up putting together my self-care shit, the workbook. And it's a series, it's 99 pages, and not all of them are lists, but it's just a bunch of lists so that you can say, these are the reasons why I'm lovable. That is self-care.
Yeah.
These are the things that I'm proud of myself for. That is self-care. It's
Yeah.
these subtle things. What are the breathing exercises that I go to? Where are my favorite restaurants? Where do I want to go eat given the choice? Um, so it's really, I love massages myself. But it is really in the day to day, the minute to minute, taking a minute to breathe, calming your nervous system down, and just finding that inner peace and joy and love and coming from that place. That is really, truly self-care.
I agree with all of that. I love the lists. I had a guest semi recently that had said, suggested making a list, and my brain went to, well, I have a lot of projects, that a lot of different books that I'm writing that I bounce around to. But when I have the time to write, I will often use half of that time trying to figure out what I want to write. And instead having a list of these are the current projects
Yes.
that you have, and be like, oh, I haven't worked on that one, or that one's really exciting to me right now, and just picking one and going,
Yes.
instead of trying to spend 15 of my 20 minutes figuring out what to write.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it seems so simple, right? Like you think that you're going to have no problem recalling these things at the time, but and I really, when I first started, I didn't like to be by myself. I avoided being by myself. I distracted myself with my phone, with friends, with a drink, like whatever it was. I did not want to be alone. And in the beginning, when I was divorced, the kids would all go with their dad, and I would sit there of like, I I I had wanted nothing to do with it. And I was forced one long weekend when I was dog sitting that I had to be in the house and not have friends over. And so it was a very challenging weekend for me. But that was when I first thought, oh, what, I actually really enjoyed my own company. I read and I wrote and I, was outside playing with the dogs and I cooked and it was really nice. And now I love my time by myself. I've chosen to spend time with myself over going out with friends or doing something. And that to me that's just life changing for me.
Yeah. And we'll bring it full circle by saying, I feel so good to know that there's someone else that was like me. Because
Oh,
like my sister used to joke that, that I was the Little Mermaid, that I just wanted to be where the people are.
Hmm.
And I just did not want to be by myself. And now there's time. I mean, I'll wake up an hour before everybody else just so I get a little bit of time by myself. And there's, days where I get to work from home, and my boyfriend is off at work and my son's at school, and so it's like, yeah, I get to work from home by myself.
Yeah,
And it's and I love the times that everybody's here too, but it fills a different
it
bucket.
is different.
Mhm.
And it was really like a snowball effect because I didn't want to be home. Then I wasn't keeping up with laundry or, keeping the house as clean as it might have. And so then I would come home and it was a mess and I didn't want to be there. And it was just this kind of vicious cycle. And so now I'm home and I have my peace in my surroundings. And I also have all of these, books I want to read, and I'm painting, and I have projects, house projects, and I have so many things that I just enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Turn the music on, it's a whole new thing for me.
Yeah. Is there a book that's been instrumental in your personal development?
Um, there's a book called Women Who Love Too Much,
Hmm.
and by Robin Norwood. And that is the book that I had been exposed to, like Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. That's
Hmm.
the classic, like the Bible on codependency. She really started the conversation. But Women Who Love Too Much talks about how I used to identify myself by my relationship status. And so if I ran into somebody and they said, "How are you?" I would say, "Well, I'm dating this guy," or "I'm talking, I might go on a date with this guy," or, this is, and so it was always about my relationship. And I remember even in my marriage, I remember saying out loud to my ex-husband, "When we're okay, I'm okay. But when we're not okay, I'm not okay." So
Yes.
codependent. Um, and so in Women Who Love Too Much, she goes into how codependency in a relationship, kind of to the extreme, is called a love addiction, which I had never heard before, but I really identified with it. And because of that, that book is really what got me to commit to learning about my own codependent behaviors, how I was a part of the puzzle, and started the healing. So for me, that book is just, eh, you know, that's a really big one for
Yeah.
people that struggle in their relationships and whether or not they should leave someone or um, all kinds of things.
Yeah. It sounds interesting, and I feel like I sort of lucked out in breaking free of codependency, because I was in a marriage and the marriage ended, and then I went and I made a friend that was like, we were in a non-romantic relationship,
Yeah.
um, but I was codependent with her. And while I was codependent with her, I met my boyfriend. And so he and I developed a healthy relationship because I was codependent with someone else already.
Yeah.
And then she passed away, and I had already been, doing been inside coaching and done a lot of self-healing. And so it was just like this obvious. Of course I missed her, and I still miss her, and I, still wish she was here, and she was like a
Yeah.
second mom to my son. But the the codependency dissolved somehow. I like, if you asked me to teach you how to dissolve codependency, I couldn't do it because I don't
Yeah.
know. It just
Well,
happened.
that's what I coach, is how to dissolve it. But that's the beautiful part about it. Like what I always say is that there's hundreds of behaviors that are codependent, but all you have to do is learn self-care, which is obviously what you've been learning. Self-care is the one cure for codependency. And when you do that, you're able to kind of bring down all of those unhealthy behaviors at the same time. So it happens quickly and it happens, you know, faster than we think we can, because sometimes we find out we're codependent and we're like, oh my God, I've been this way for 30 or 40 or 50 years, and how could I ever change? But like you said, once you get into that self-care work that you didn't even realize that that's what it was working on, it just brings it all down.
Yeah. I think I, in hindsight, realized that I was codependent. And by the time that I wasn't any longer, it was all in the past. So it had all been healed, and which I'm grateful for. I've been reflecting a lot lately on being very grateful of doing the things that I did when I did them. And I would say the majority of my adult life has been that way. And I guess, I've been playing with this idea of really tapping into my intuition. But when I think about all the things that I've done when I did them and being grateful for doing it before I knew I needed to.
Yeah.
I think I've been following my intuition without even knowing or thinking about it, and just doing it and trusting myself. Yeah.
Trusting yourself that's the key to it all. And like you said, with your friend, we find that if we're codependent with a friend, then we might also be codependent in our relationships or at work. It's not just with our partner. It could be with friends or with our kids, with our parents. It can be, anywhere.
Yeah. Where can our listeners find you?
My website is kathyleckey.com, and that's got my TED Talk that I did when my ex-husband went to prison. For that, I did the TED Talk 2 weeks later, so that's on there. And the self-care shit, the workbook is on there. So that's got information about the coaching and everything on it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here today, and I feel like you've opened up the definition of codependency, my definition of codependency, because you named several things that I was like, I wouldn't have labeled that as codependent.
Mm-hmm.
So
people pleasing is the number one thing that people don't realize is codependent. They think that they're just being really nice, or but people pleasing is a big sign of codependency.
Because I think I actually even say I'm a recovering codependent people pleaser. And I think I can just shorten that sentence.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I appreciate you being here and giving us all this cool information. I'm geeking out on it.
I love it. I'm fascinated by it. I love watching it work. I love watching people learn it, like quickly. I really love it. It's really it's fascinating to me, and it's fun. Yeah. It's fun.
It sounds like Siri enjoys it too.
Yes.
Well, we'll have another episode of Imperfect Momming for you next week. And until then, keep healing. Bye, guys. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit AlysiaLyons.com. That's AlysiaLyons.com. See you next time.